Awesome. So, well, yeah, welcome to virtual Friday's Dire Literary Series. And tonight, my guest is Lisa Borders. And Lisa Borders' third novel, Last Night at the Disco, a dark comedy about the disco era, was published last fall. She's the author of two previous novels, The 51st State and Cloud Cuckoo Land. The latter chose as the Pat Conroy as the winner of the River City Publishers Fred Bonney Award and a 2003 Massachusetts Book Award honoree. Frequent humor contributor at McSweeney's, Lisa's received a 2025 Mass Cultural Council grant. She lives outside of Boston with her partner and two rescue cats. And we'll turn it over to you, Lisa.
Okay. So it's wonderful to be here. As I was saying to Tim earlier, I have such long times between novels that the last time I read in the Dyer series was 2013 and it was in person. But I'm delighted to be here virtually. So I am just going to read the opening chapter of my novel, Last Night at the Disco. It's pretty short. It won't take very long, but I think it gives you a really good idea of what the book's about. So the page, oh, and here is the book. I am going to read it off my screen because the print in this book is very small. But what I will just show you is that the book is in the form of an email to former Rolling Stone publisher Jan Wenner. So I don't know how easy it is to see that, but there's a little email header at the top of the first page, which I will read. Okay. So it says the email is coming from Linda Boyle Ross, whose email handle is dancingqueen54@aol.com. And it's sent on Monday, April 15th, 2019 at 3:54 a.m. It's to Jan Wenner, jan@rollingstone.com. And the subject is correction requested, Ora Lockhart inducts Johnny Engel into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Rolling Stone number 1326, April 2019. Dear Mr. Wenner, we met twice at Studio 54 in the year or so after the club opened. Once on a banquet where we chatted with Andy Warhol and Brooke Shields, and one brief but memorable encounter in the bathroom. I have especially fond memories of the latter and trust that you do as well. The purpose of this email is not to revisit our incendiary past, however, but in reference to the above-mentioned article, which chronicles circumstances well beyond the Hall of Fame induction. I wish to clarify your mention of me and of my role in launching the careers of Ora Lockhart and Johnny Engel. There are a number of factual inaccuracies in your story, falsehoods that have plagued me for decades. These untruths, I believe, all stem from the same source. A 1980 New York Magazine article, Looking for Ms. Goodbar, with this absurdly sensationalistic subheader. New Jersey junior high school teacher by day, coke-fueled disco queen by night. Where is Linda Boyle now? It painted me, my husband, and the events that forced us to leave the tri-state area in terms that were both reductive and unflattering. Rest assured that I don't blame your magazine for these inaccuracies. No, I blame the reporter who wrote about me back in 1980, interviewing Johnny Engel, Steve Rubell, three of my former co-workers, a publicity-hungry ex-beau, and one of my perpetually jealous sisters-in-law. Without further preamble, then, the inaccuracies in your article include the following. 1. I was not fired from my teaching position. I resigned. 2. I was never charged with any crime. 3. My husband was also never formally charged with any crime. My other objection to your magazine's story concerns a quote from Ora Lockhart. Ora is on record as saying that the Hall of Fame induction was long overdue, that Johnny was finally getting the recognition he deserved, quote, after his life and career were nearly destroyed. Because I am mentioned in the very next sentence, the implication is that Ora was referring to me. Imagine the outrage I felt upon reading this. Without me, neither Ora nor Johnny would have the fame they now enjoy. Ora likely would never have escaped that waterlogged hiccup of a town where we first met. My immediate reaction to the article was, of course, to fling my copy of the magazine across the kitchen. As I then began to smash plate after plate from our cupboard, my husband, who had retreated to the safety of the lanai, called out these life-changing words. Send a correction to Rolling Stone, babe. Set the record straight. But permanently amending the record requires more than a brief iteration of facts. Where to begin? With the weeks or months leading up to the events of May 24th, 1978? The year before, when Aura and I met Johnny? Or perhaps with my own origin story? Like most of the swamp rat communities lining New Jersey's Raritan Bay, my hometown of Keyhole, a place my high school friends and later my students derisively called the Hole, had a pull on its inhabitants that was as strong as the Atlantic's tides. There's a reason Bruce Springsteen wrote so many songs of escape early in his career. It was a rare thing even to make it to the nearby city, as I did in 1969 when I went off to Brooklyn College. The tide rolled me out, and then 6 years later, the tide, assisted by my mother, who selfishly denied me the aid my father was more than willing to provide to help support my dream of achieving fame as an East Village poet, rolled me back in. I washed up once again on the shores of Keyhole, and for 3 years, from 1975 to 1978, taught 8th grade English at my old junior high school. While it's true that I never tilted the axis of the poetry world as I'd once planned to do, my early work was lauded by none other than the great John Ashbery, a dear mentor who in a college workshop referred to the imagery in one of my poems as, quote, painfully exact. I made my mark in other ways. Had events unfolded differently, I might well have ended up in the city, my acquaintance with Calvin Klein and Bianca Jagger blossoming into inevitable friendships, my visage most likely adorning the cover of your celebrated magazine when my first book of poetry was published to wide acclaim. Perhaps even Aura and I would still be close. We'd meet for brunch in Tribeca or Williamsburg or the Lower East Side on Sundays and walk arm in arm down Orchard Street, a middle-aged woman and her slightly more mature, more glamorous mentor, two women who, despite a 12-year age difference, would look more like sisters than student and teacher. I may have ended up more notorious than famous, but make no mistake. Long before Aura Lockhart began commodifying her feminist rage ballads, I was the best-known person to come out of Keyhole, New Jersey. It would be impossible to understand my sudden fame without an in-depth accounting of the events of the 1977 to 78 school year, my last months in New Jersey. Johnny, Aura, meeting my husband, Studio 54, Cher, Halston, all of it. I was 26 years old and at the height of my beauty, as you may well remember. Does it sound vain for me to say that I was beautiful? Would you prefer I pretend that I was plain, or average, or oblivious to my own good looks? I was beautiful, had been beautiful since I was 11, and I knew it. If it helps, I'm now 67 years old, and while I'm often told that I look closer to 50 than 70, I project more an approximation of glamour rather than glamour itself. But put aside for a moment the ravages of time. Picture it, October of 1977. The cars are huge, the briny air and the nearby ocean polluted. The Bee Gees and Fleetwood Mac, Electric Light Orchestra and ABBA dominate the radio. People still listen to the radio. There's a junior high school in a small town on the central Jersey shore where many of the teachers are young and searching for whatever would come after the hippie era. Some of us are living double lives in the city. Aura Lockhart is 14 years old, has been in Keyhole for 1 month, and things are not going well for her. And my attempts to save her, as you will see, do not go quite as planned. And that's the end of the first chapter.
Well, thank you so much. I was so glad to get a copy of the book sent to me, and it's really, it's a great book. And I want to actually open with like, how did you decide to use like email as a device to move the narrative? Was that always in the pre-planning, or?
Yeah, it wasn't initially. So I had written, I think, about 75 pages, and I showed it to a dear writer friend of mine, who I think you probably know, Christopher Castellani.
Oh yeah.
And one of his suggestions, so initially it was just the character Linda telling her story to no one in particular. And he said, I think it would really be stronger if she was talking directly to someone. Like, who is she telling the story to, and why is she telling it at this moment in time? Which I thought was terrific advice. And it immediately made sense to me that since I knew that she was going to be involved with these rock musicians and that she would really think that she discovered them and that they owed her a lot more than they actually did owe her. I thought it made sense to frame it as something she needs to correct to set the record straight, and that kind of led me to she's going to email Jan Wenner. And my agent at the time, Esmond Harmsworth, who very sadly died
Oh,
before this book was able to come out, but was like a huge champion of it. He had also told me about a book. Oh God, and I am blanking on the name, but it will come to me in a second. There are lots of epistolary novels, but there was in particular a book with kind of an unhinged narrator that used email as a form of address, and so it seemed to work pretty well.
now, your main character, Linda, she's basically described by others as a deranged, a narrator whose phone number you would block if they were on your list, and also an anti hero. Now, how deep into your own psyche did you have to go in order to create a character such as this? Because you're pretty much known as one of the nicest people around.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that's my reputation. I try. It's so much fun to write a bad girl, especially when you're somebody that does try to be nice to people and mostly plays by the rules. It's really, really fun to write someone who just does not give a crap about the rules. Linda really just cares about herself. I guess I think we all have little selfish streaks in us, even if we know better than to behave that way, that we can tap into. I would also say, and I have said this at readings before, that I did have a narcissist or two in my family that nobody quite like Linda, but I'm familiar enough with that behavior that it wasn't that hard to come up with a character like Linda. But it was. I think Linda is multi-layered. I think she's not just this self-centered person, and to me, that's what makes her fun to explore.
All right. Question in the chat from Jennifer, and I'll leave all the compliments too because those are a lot of fun. Lisa, you're looking great and sounding great. What are your thoughts about using pop culture so extensively in fiction? And she says she knows people feel differently about it.
Oh, I guess I didn't realize there was a controversy. I love using pop culture in fiction. I mean, I think I know what she means by the controversy. I think there are people who feel that fiction should be timeless, and that you shouldn't really reference cultural artifacts or touchstones because it kind of places it in a specific time. I pretty strongly disagree with that because I think specificity is what really brings a character and a story to life. So I am always super specific about time, place, objects, the fact that she's using a payphone because it's 1977.
Hmm.
All of that stuff is actually really fun for me. And then the music that was happening at that time was also something that I really wanted to explore in the book. So the book was really designed to explore pop culture. I don't think this book would exist without it.
Now, did you have to do? I know you're from that area. Did you have to do some like back research? Because New York City and the Studio 54, New York City was so differently in the 70s than it was in the 80s than it is now. I was just
Yeah.
there. It's like a big shopping mall. So, did you have to like look back and research New York how it was, or did you remember that pretty strongly?
So I did both. So the character Aura, who is Linda's student in the novel, who she mentions in that opening chapter, is 14 when the book takes place in 1977 to 78, and I am roughly Aura's age. So I was a little bit too young to be going to Studio 54 or to see like bands at CBGB's, but I was aware of all this excitement happening across the river that I kind of couldn't access. And the town that Linda lives in is really, I mean, I grew up in a town called Keyport, so this is Keyhole. It's pretty nakedly the town that I lived in when I was a kid. And I when I think the first draft, I mostly relied on memory. And then I did a lot of research to make sure that my memory was accurate, and there were even little things like I mentioned the payphone. I knew there was a point when the cost of a call went from a dime to a quarter, and I couldn't remember exactly when that was. So there were just small things like that that I had to research just to make sure I got it right. The music stuff, I did more extensive research because I was aware that it was happening, but I didn't, even though I'm very into music, I certainly didn't know like every band that played at CBGB's or Max's Kansas City in 1977. Like that was stuff that I really had to look up.
Also, Studio 54 was so iconic. And when you were researching Studio
Yeah.
54, did you uncover anything that was surprising to you about the plays?
Um, I think that I don't, I guess this was a little surprising to me. I think when I first started writing the book, I knew that Studio 54 had been a mix of regular people and that it was a place where they could sort of brush elbows with celebrities. But I read a few books about Studio 54, and there was also a great documentary film that came out a couple of years ago. I think it's just called Studio 54, that had a lot of in-depth stuff in it. And what I discovered was there really was kind of a little family and community there. And it was certainly queer culture was very big at Studio 54. It was really like kind of a magical place for the people who were there in that place and time. And I think that the celebrities were only a part of it. Like I think it was really for many people it was like a little family. And that I think surprised me because I really had thought of it from the outside as more a glamorous place that people were desperate to get into. But if you got in early, and I mean the way I wrote the book, Linda stumbles into it when it first opens. And from everything I read in my research, back then you could become a regular pretty easily,
Hmm.
especially if you were, if Steve Rubell deemed you attractive enough, it would be pretty easy to get let in. And it was much easier to become a regular if you started going when it first opened versus later when it became very well known.
And there's nothing that has really rivaled Studio 54 except maybe the Viper Room, but that's about it.
Yeah,
John wants to know, is CBGB's in the book as well?
it is. And actually, so I always feel like it's the novel's called Last Night at the Disco, but it's actually like secretly also a punk rock novel. Because honestly, the music that I prefer is more punk, post-punk, new wave. Although I discovered that I like disco a lot more than I thought I did when I started researching the book, which was kind of a fun thing to figure out. But yes, there are scenes at CBGB, at Max's Kansas City, so it's not just set in the disco world.
Now, you've always been drawn to music. Do you play music? I mean, there are or know people that play because lots of musical artists, their narcissism can be compared to your main character.
Yeah. I do not play music. It's, maybe someday, I don't know. Maybe there's still time for me to learn an instrument. I kind of wish I had when I was younger, but because I think music is a pretty equal passion to writing for me. If I had felt like I had any special musical talent, I probably would have gone in that direction. I think writing always came more naturally for me. But depending on the day you catch me, sometimes I actually feel more passionately about music. They're pretty close for me. But yeah, no, maybe someday before I die, I'll be in a band.
Tell us about using humor in this book in particularly, and why did you decide your other books have been, more literary, very direct, straight fiction, standard, as the way I would describe that type of fiction. So tell me about the use of humor in that book, in your new book, and why did you decide to go that route instead of the looking for Mr. Goodbar type of tragic straightforward story?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So what happened around 2016, 2017, I started experimenting with writing short humor. And it was something that I had always wanted to do. I loved McSweeney's. I read it. I had been reading it for years and years. I always wanted to write a piece for them, but I really just didn't have the courage. I didn't think I was funny enough or cool enough or whatever ideas I had in my head about myself. And I had a bunch of things happen in 2016 that were kind of traumatizing and just some, typical life stuff. But there were a bunch of things that happened in kind of rapid succession. And I was just sort of like, screw it. I am gonna just try to write what I want to write and we'll see what happens. And I actually worked on a piece for a very long time and it was about menopause, which now lots of women are talking about it, but in 2017 it was still not being talked about that much publicly. And I wrote this piece and I sent it to McSweeney's and I was like, they're never going to accept it, but at least I sent it and they accepted it. And I was just like, wow, I can actually do this. And then I was so shocked that they accepted it that I didn't send them anything for like another year. And then the next piece I sent them, they also accepted. So then I was like, maybe this is actually a thing I can do. And then I actually took some classes in short humor and satire. I started taking it a lot more seriously as an art form. I connected with other humor writers. It was like I had always been part of this like literary fiction world, and it was just like this whole other writing world that I just adore. I mean, I still love my lit fic people too, but it was just so much fun to find this whole other side of writing. And so it was writing short humor that finally it really just started informing all of my writing. And then I had had this idea for this book for a while. I didn't initially intend for it to be a dark comedy, but it just started to make more and more sense for me to write it that way. And I have to say, it was so much more fun to write than my two serious books.
All right, this is more of a psychological question. You moved away from New Jersey years ago. So why does New Jersey foster and stimulate your imagination when you write versus where you currently live?
Yeah, I'm always writing about New Jersey. It's really interesting. I mean, I think it's common for people to revisit places they grew up in their writing. Um, and I actually lived in two very distinct parts of New Jersey, so I've written about both of them now. I also my first book, I also a lot of it was set in Philadelphia, where I had lived for many years after grad school. But I think my next book is going to be set in Massachusetts. I think I've been here for like more than 30 years now, and I think I'm like finally at the point where I can set something here. But I I think I just had a lot of stuff to work out. I always describe myself as being a very proud Jersey girl, but there's also like baggage that comes with coming from New Jersey. So, and I think some of my experiences there were not fantastic as a kid. So I had some demons to work out, and I think maybe I have finally said everything I need to say about Jersey, but you never know. I might have
It
more.
was very sad about losing your agent because he was so beloved by so many writers. Are
Yeah.
you looking for another agent, or is that just something that's like very very difficult to even consider?
I actually have a new agent at the agency where Avitas, which was the agency that Esmond worked under. So because he died like a few months before this book was coming out, I really needed somebody to help me with various business aspects of it. So I feel very lucky. I got this wonderful agent, Rachel Ann Cantor, who is just a sweetheart and really loves my writing and gets me. And I'm kind of amazed that I got so lucky twice. Because I really didn't. Yeah, I mean, I really sort of thought I was just screwed when, aside from the grief of the loss, my books have all been small press books. my agent never really made money on me. And he just, he was always the kind of agent. He had a number of clients like me. He would just take on writers who he really believed in. And he was a really rare bird in the industry where he just didn't really care if he made money. He had some clients that made tons of money, and I think that sort of made up for it. Um, but I really thought I am probably not going to get another agent. And I was very happy to see that I was wrong about that.
And that's awesome. What's next for you?
So so I have basically have I have a novel that I have sort of started. I can't decide if it's two novels that I've stuffed together, and if so, which one I should work on. So that's kind of what I'm trying to untangle right now. I may possibly have two novels that I have sort of wound together, but I am working on a thing that is set in Massachusetts and deals at least in part with. I lived in Somerville for a very long time, and then I got priced out like so many people in, the Boston area. And so it deals a little bit with that, aspect of Gen X and kind of,
Well, since there are rock stars in all of your books, is there going to be a rock star in this one?
there is, depending on which book I do, there is a band that almost made it and never quite made it. And now they are older.
Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here and reading and sharing your stuff and questions. And you want to find out a little more about Lisa, you can go to lisaborders.com, and there's the site and it's about her books and about her. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tim, and I'm so happy that you've been doing the Dyer all these years. It's just such a wonderful place for writers to visit. I really appreciate you and what you do.
Well, thanks so much. And anyone that's watching the stream on Facebook, um, and you want to be on the open mic, please come on in and use the link, and we'll be happy to. First of all, thanks for watching, and we'll be happy to let you in.
Yeah.